Hello and welcome, my name is Trismegistus, and in this video I'll be answering as many of your questions as I can about the Space Age expansion for Factorio. Some of the questions, I confess, I don't have answers to, and I'll make those as clear as I can as we go on. Other questions it is probably best for me to cover in the live stream so that I can go into more detail. So several possible reasons why I might not cover your question if you did ask one. The first could be that I'm going to cover it in the live stream. The second could be that I simply didn't see it, so please feel free to post it again. And the third could be that it relates to either the end game or the final planet. I'm going to be covering those in a separate video that I'll put out next week. I've done my best to make this video as searchable as possible with timestamps and good descriptions of what's going on in the questions. I've also split it up so that there are nice pauses between the questions so that you don't accidentally roll into one you don't want to hear about. I've also grouped things up as sensibly as I can so that you can focus on a particular planet if that's what you're interested in. But inevitably there is going to be spoilers in this video if you are trying to avoid all Space Age content. And I should note, I guess, there are little bits of extra stuff from me in the video, so some of the questions didn't get asked, but I thought they were interesting topics to mention, so watch out for those in the video as well. So without further ado, let's get on with it, shall we? Your general questions. Ultimate Plays asks, is the new update fun? Yes, both the version 2 update and Space Age are amazing. Baker Magician asks, any real big surprises left? The biggest surprise, I would say, was revealed in the most recent Friday Facts 432, where they talked about Aquilo. I'm not going to talk about that, obviously, because I've said I won't be doing any kind of spoilers for the final planet or endgame. The endgame is a little surprising. It's not massively so, but it is a little bit of a surprise. There is one thing I think I can talk about that is quite interesting and quite a surprise. There is another really big one, I would say, that I kind of don't want to talk about because, you know, I'm sure somebody will eventually, but I don't know, it's not quite endgame really, so I could talk about it, but it just feels like something, it's worth you discovering yourselves. But I'll show you the thing that I'm talking about that is a bit of a surprise. So tanks are now like version 1 of Spidertron. So I'm in one of the current playthroughs that I'm doing, and if I go to the map view and I find my tank, we've now got the pinning, so I can just find the tank straight away with the pop-up there. So go straight to my tank, click on that, and I can drive it remotely. So I am now in the tank, I can drive it. And yes, it is perfectly possible to run yourself over, and I have done that. But the point of this is it's like a level 1 Spidertron. It's a little janky, if I'm totally honest, how you do logistics in it, because it has an equipment grid. You can put everything that you can put in an equipment grid in there. Obviously some of it's like more or less useful in a tank. But you'll also notice it's quite a big equipment grid. You can get quite a lot of stuff in, and as it says there, you can do logistics. As I say, it is a little janky how you do that. So how you would request, for example, let's request up some more flamer arrow. You would go on here. This is actually a ghost cursor, so this isn't your inventory. Let's put something random on. Let's request radars. Let's request radars. Okay, and you just click on there, and it orders in radars, and you will see bots starting to deliver that. You can only do like right click to add one on, and left click to do a full stack. Basically, there's not really a way of doing setting amounts or anything like that. And you see we've now got a request for 46 or 34 and 16, so the bots are delivering whatever I requested, radars. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. And basically say I can drive it remotely, and you can say fill this with whatever you want. You can put in, you know, fusion reactors and all that sort of stuff when you eventually get it. So it is like a level 1 Spidertron basically. So yes, but there are plenty of other little small surprises and things you don't know about, and the ways things work. But I thought that was, you know, quite a fun, quite an interesting one, and quite a useful one that I'm a little surprised they haven't actually done in a Friday Facts. ProVet asks, should I take a week off for the update, or should I wait? Obviously I appreciate this is a little bit of a jokey question, but I think there is enough content if you did take a week off that you would have plenty to do. You know, you would not run out of things to build and places to go and mechanics to discover and optimization to do. It is a big expansion. You know, it is, if not bigger, then it is certainly the same size as the base game. And if you wanted to go big, you know, wanted to try a relatively small mega base in that first week. I think that would be a reasonably achievable goal, so long as you were relatively experienced in the game. I still maintain my point that I'm not sure this is for newbies. I would recommend newbies playing through the base game, version 2 as it's going to be, and if they really like it and they launch a rocket and all those sorts of things, then pick up the expansion. Basically, I don't think really you should be buying the expansion if you've no experience with the game. Now, you could get the demo. That would be one very good way of doing it, is you get the demo, play the demo, and if you really, really like it, then get both, But I certainly feel that that's quite a lot of money for a lot of people. So, £70, I think it is, $70. That's quite an investment for a game that is very niche and may not appeal to you. So I think there's a lot of sense in just getting the base game, playing that if you've not played it before. If you have played it, you've experienced, you know what you're doing, then dive straight in, basically, and you will have enough content to last that week, and you will have a lot of fun, I think. Also, it is stable, it is I've not encountered any crashes. I have had a few bugs and have reported those and what have you. What you're actually looking at now is one of the release clients, so this is post the whole beta version. This is the actual game as it will release, pending any bug fixes that they do in the next week or so. But yes, I found it to be stable, I found it to be, functional. There are some bits and pieces that I think probably need to work in things like UI and stuff like that, but they're not bad, they're just a little bit confusing for what they are. And the other thing I would say is, and I've said this before, it never goes on discount, there are no sales, they're not doing a bundle, you can't, buy the base game and the expansion and get 10% off or anything like that. It's just available at the price it is. That's a philosophical thing for Kovarex. He's kind of explained it. So it won't ever go down in price is the point. So that means, there is no pre-order bonus. There is no, if I buy it now, will it get cheaper? The answer is no. Just buy it when you feel confident that it is something you want to buy. So yeah, you're not going to lose out anything other than time. And as I say, and I've said this before as well, a simple version 2 playthrough is a perfectly fun thing to do. I don't think if you wait, all you're missing out on is like surprise, getting the surprises yourself and things like that. So, do make it a sensible purchasing decision. Don't have any regrets. JB asks, were there new hotkeys, shortcuts, etc.? Yes, there are. This is probably one that's better addressed in the live stream. So if you want to hop on the live stream, or I will try to remember to do it. There are obviously, there are a lot of key bindings in Factorio. It's just fundamentally what it is. They have tried to not add too many more, so that there aren't shortcuts and things on every single key, not least so that people can rebind them and not lose things. But there are two I would like to mention, and I have talked about this in the Let's Play, as I say, but of course you won't have seen that. So yeah, one of them is Flip and Glip, which have now been rebound, but also there's a reason for that, and I really like that change. The other one I want to mention is about the combat, so I'll show you how both of those work now. Okay, so Flip and Glip, what they've done is they've rebound them to H and V, so as in horizontal flip and vertical flip. I quite like that key binding. I do occasionally muscle memory into the other one. You always had a bit of an overlap with F, and this is the reason they've rebound them, because obviously when you hit F you would pick up items. Now F was also flip, okay, and it didn't matter because Flip and Glib only applied for blueprints and copy paste. Now they apply in game. So if I hit H here, for example, that belt just flips around. Can you see that? I don't know if I'm zoomed in enough. Let's zoom right in. There you go. So that belt is flipping around, and I'm pressing the H key. Okay, and if I press the other key, it won't really do anything because vertical doesn't mean anything for that belt. But what's a good example? Maybe if I flip this inserter. So if I do V on that, you see it flips around straight away and does a vertical flip. So that's actually really, it's not, as I say, quite in my muscle memory yet, but if you think about it, it's really useful because this thing. So for example here, I would have to rotate round, and it does this thing where it drops items on the floor and moves them about and grabs it, whereas with vertical flip and horizontal flip, you're just instantly going the other way. Yeah, so it is useful in that way. But it does mean, as I say, F and G, it does mean, F and G don't do that anymore. And that's the reason they've done it, because by having it in the game, if you're hitting F to pick up items, and you rebind F to be flip and glip, then you would accidentally be turning things around, and that's what I was doing during the LAN party, because I rebound them because I couldn't understand why, and random bits of belt were being, flipped around, and I was like, what's going on here? And it was me accidentally hovering over while hitting F and G, and it doing both operation, or F certainly, and it basically flipping things while I was also trying to pick things up. So it became a doubly bound key. So, you could get around it that way, but, if your muscle memory is F and G, you're not going to rebound it to something else, are you? The other one then is combat. This one I don't like. Okay, so what they've done, if we go over here and I'll select the shotgun. Now, if I hit tab, doesn't flip. It doesn't change what we're holding, basically. So if I hit tab, it now goes into the map view. Aim is still map view. So I don't really know why they've done that rebinding. That's the one I don't get, okay? In order to change what you've got selected, you have to hit C. And of course C is force fire in the current version of the game. So force fire has also been rebound. So obviously if I'm just, shotgun will just always fire anyway. It doesn't really have force fire. But if we select something that does, and same with a flamethrower, select something that does, then if I hit C, all I do is go through the menu, okay? What you have to do is here hold shift space, okay? So it's on shift space now, force fire. I don't like those rebindings. I've kept them, I've just left it as is, so that this is a completely vanilla, this is the Let's Play map, basically, like an earlier version of it. But, yeah, so they've rebound those. I don't really get the rebindings, and my muscle memory is so much, particularly, it's not so bad muscle memory problems when you're in normal situations, building your base, etc., etc. When you get into the whole thing of where you're in combat, and you're reliant on your muscle memory and doing things quickly, the number of times I've been driving around in my tank, hit tab to change weapon, ended up in the map, and then I'm obviously doing that because I'm still trying to, turn around or what have you, okay? And then I'm like, oh no, I had to tab out of it, and oh no, change weapons, and I just don't like the change. And I don't really see any reason for that one. Those keys are just literally rebinding things that were already bound to perfectly good things. I wouldn't be surprised if it does tie up with other games or something, but it just, to me, it's not adding any value, those changes, particularly the tab for map. I sort of get that one because it's close by, but I'm perfectly happy to just hit M. It's so annoying in combat to be suddenly in the map view when you don't want to be, particularly with the tank. Gords asks, have they fixed the graphical clipping of stacked items on belts into underground belts graphics yet? As mentioned here. I'll be totally honest, I don't know. So I've set up a bit of a nonsense machine that's just going to stick a load of stuff on belts. Let's see what happens with the clipping. Oh, before we start though, it's a bit of a funny thing. If you're using green belts and you don't have power armor on, which is fairly unlikely, I would say, you can't actually run fast enough to travel down a belt. So you get dragged along and basically held in position. You can just, if on a straight bit, you can just about go there, but crossing a belt, as you can see there, I can't move quick enough. So yeah, so be careful of that if you're wandering about without power armor on. So yeah, let's just turn this on and see whether it clips, basically. I think it still does, doesn't it? I think those top of the stacks, there in particular, just realised I set one of the machines up backwards, so I've just fixed that. So here, I think the top of the stacks are just clipping into the top of the belt hood. And same here as well by the looks of things. So yeah, I don't think they fixed that. I would guess they probably won't, to be honest with you. It looks alright when it's vertical, because obviously they're not in the way. But yeah, I suspect that's just a reflection of the fact that the stacks are too high for the graphics of the hood of the belt. So yeah, I don't think that'll get fixed, if I'm honest. James Rundle asks, are you concerned that it might take a long time for larger mods to become compatible with Space Age? In the honest truth is I don't know, basically. So I do know that a lot of the mod makers were at the LAN Party and have had early access. I also know that it issued an early version of the revised API, and that has been updated in line with developments in the game, but that it didn't have any of the spoilery stuff in, so mod makers won't have seen all that's changed, essentially. So that's the type of thing that will be like, oh right, well this is what we've got to do, therefore we need to change our stuff, and that's going to take weeks, months, what have you. The other thing is, I believe a lot of entities have probably been renamed and like restructured and stuff in the game, and even very simple mods that do something like Factorio, where it changes the colour of concrete. If that concrete entity, class, object, whatever, has been renamed, then that mod will just break. So there's a lot of stuff I think that is going to have to change, and at the very least the mod maker will need to declare that the mod is compatible with version 2. So instantly on its release, those that haven't had that access or aren't doing modding anymore, etc., etc., they just all instantly stop working. But in all honesty, play it without mods. That would be my recommendation anyway. Even if you're using like loads and loads of mods, go in your first time completely new, look at the base game as it's supposed to be before you decide what you're going to add in terms of mods. In terms of overhauls in particular, I really wouldn't touch them at all, until you've at least played it through once, maybe several times. In terms of quality of life stuff, you may well find it's already in the game. There is a lot that's been added that was quality of life mods, basically. My recommendation would be absolutely play the game fresh out the box, as it were. Don't have any mods on, and don't assume any mod will work. Okay, I think that's the thing to do. Is just if you want to use mods and you feel you can't live without them, then you have to go to an earlier version. SG Hoosman asks, maybe you can make a video on new and modified achievements. Okay, so achievements is a little tricky for me to talk about because that is spoiler territory. There are some achievements, as you'd expect, related to the final planet and endgame, and I've said this video will not have those in. And I'll be honest, I can't be bothered to blur things out and stuff like that. So basically what I'm showing here just at the moment is the basic achievements. I believe they've had a little bit of a touch-up, and there are some, you will notice one, for example, that I don't, it's not particularly, it's the point of the game. At the very bottom here, the achievement Reach for the Stars has been achieved, basically, because I have launched a platform at this stage in this save. And so I don't think there are any particularly major changes to the basic ones, which is a little bit odd, basically, because there's one achievement in particular that if you play in Space Age, you cannot help but get, effectively, because the way they've rearranged the tech tree, and it's not something I'm bothered about spoiling, and we will reach it in a minute. But basically, you see how we've got the science pack researches and all this sort of stuff. It's all basically the same, but now what I've done with this save in particular, is launching a rocket without building any lasers. But there's another achievement for launching a rocket without building providers, buffers, or requester chests. Well, they are locked behind space science. So if you play in Space Age, you get the game. I say it's not my recommendation, as I've mentioned before, but you get the game and you enable Space Age, and that's your first playthrough. You cannot help but get this achievement, even though before it was a proper challenge. It was, because they're so useful chests that I would want them as soon as I possibly could, and I would unlock them and before you've launched these Space Science, because Space Science was way, way, way later. So this is very much like a non-achievement in a sense, because you can't even get chests until you've launched a rocket. You have to have got Space Science. They are locked behind Space Science to get requesters, providers, buffers, basically. So you get the others, as you can see. I've got storage chests on the go. But yeah, so I say there have been art tweaks, and I believe to the achievements, but pretty much they are the standard achievements are as you'd expect. On the live stream, I say if if people want to, we'll go over them, but I'll have to leave talking about all the rest of the achievements until my next video, on after the 21st, basically. So yeah, so there are lots of new achievements. So you can see the number as well. I think there's 38 in the base game. There's now 50 been added, basically. I think it's 38 anyway, you might correct me. But yeah, so there's a lot of achievements been added, and it's because there are lots of planets and lots of different things to do and all that sort of stuff. But I can't show you them, as I say, because some of them are clearly related to the end game and Aquilo. Big E asks, what were the changes that happened due to player feedback during the LAN event? And what changes got reverted during the LAN event? So the kind of real answer to this is they will issue patch notes as part of the release. So you will be able to basically look at it yourself and see what changed and when and all that sort of stuff. The patch notes are gigantic. I mean, literally pages and pages and pages of stuff, both saying what they added and all that sort of stuff. So you get all the detail in there, and you can probably work out from when the LAN party was what they did and didn't do. So obviously one of the big, changes that's been happening is the whole Gleba stuff. I'll talk about another section. One thing I thought might be interesting just to pick up on here was what the cheesing that people did in the LAN party. So the first one was that the speedrunners found a positive feedback loop for wood on Gleba that meant that they got more wood out than they put in. This made power generation, and I think some other processes at that time, completely trivial. And Wooby fixed this so that this loop didn't occur and it didn't give a net gain to wood. The second one is more interesting. What was happening is that everyone was sending ammo from planets up to platforms and using that when they were travelling around the platforms. And that was not the intended behaviour, basically. That's not what they were after in terms of gameplay. What they want is for you to make the stuff on the platforms, because otherwise, basically, the asteroids are sort of pointless. The resources they're giving you, apart from the fuel, are kind of, meant to be there and in such volumes in order for you to make ammo, basically. And so they weren't happy with that. So what they've done, the fix for that, is going to be a bit controversial, because you will see here, and here, and here, that there are only 100 piercing rounds and shotgun shells in these stacks. That's not because I've limited them. If I request in more shotgun shells, for example... But yes, so they're now bringing me more shells, and you see that they're going in my inventory, not in the weapon slot, because they have halved the stack size for almost all ammunition. And that's the fix, basically. The fix is that by reducing, because platforms have very limited cargo capacity, so if you halve the amount that you can get in each stack, then a survivable journey, to and from a planet, might be more, or is probably more than you can stick in and still sensibly carry stuff. If your platform is just barreling along and all it's got is ammo in it, it's not serving any purpose. So you want to move stuff around, and so if all of your space is, being taken up by ammo, then it becomes unviable, and you have to make it on the platforms. That's the theory they're going with. I think that's going to be controversial, and I would say it is a massive pain in the bum, particularly if you're setting up walls and all this sort of stuff, and you're used to carrying around 1,000 ammo in it, only occupying 5 slots sort of thing. It now occupies 10 slots to carry 1,000 ammo. It is a bit of a pain, if I'm honest. The third one, and I think this was either Troopin's team or, he was sort of giving them hints or something at the LAN party. Troopin has been playtesting for quite a while, so he's found exploits and stuff. And it was a double whammy, basically, because what you used to be able to... You can blueprint platforms, basically. And what you used to be able to do, is retain the stops, basically. So if you had a blueprint of a platform that had on its journey list one of the intermediate or final planet type of thing, then you would put down that blueprint, and it would just be able to go to that planet, and it's when you arrive it then becomes available as a station, basically, and you can just do it. So you would be able to just skip through gigantic portions of the game by going to the planets, and in particular that final planet, Aquilo, and so you would just be able to skip ahead and just not bother doing it. And the other exploit is that the way it spawned the asteroids was based on the top of your platform. So because obviously the idea is they come down the screen because that's the direction you're travelling. And so what they did is they created the hammer, and that had a gigantic spike out the top of it, and all of the asteroids were spawning, and they had guns and stuff up there, but essentially it didn't matter if it just nibbled away at the platform. Then by the time if the bottom part arrived where it wanted to go, then all you've done is you've cost yourself a bit of platform. And platform compared to setting up a proper functioning thing that's protecting itself and blah 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 is relatively cheap. And of course you can carry it in your inventory, so it was also auto repairing, because you don't need repair packs or any of that stuff to replace them. It just builds it out. You don't need bots, you don't need to be there, it just auto builds that extra stuff, you see. So yeah, that was the other exploit they found. And I suppose I should, say as well, I mean, I don't know what changes got reverted, to be totally honest with you, and I'm not sure the changelog will actually say that. I do know, obviously, they have been doing a lot of work on Gleba and changing that quite a lot, so I guess in a sense those changes were reverted, but certainly at the LAN party there wasn't a bit of a, we've done a change and then we put it back again. I don't remember that happening, but then I was busy playing. I wasn't paying attention to that sort of stuff, so I'm afraid I can't really answer that question. John Lewis asks, you start on Nauvis still? And Baker Magician asks, can you start on any planet? No, in the base game, the expansion, all of that, you can only start on Nauvis. You cannot start on other planets. The way the planets have been designed, they are bootstrappable, so you can start there with nothing, but it's not kind of designed around that experience. So, although it's bootstrappable, there is an underlying assumption of the amount of techs you've done, the researches you've done, etc., etc. Professor Bits asks, based on seeing the blue cannon shell, will there be a cannon turret using the cannon shells as ammunition? So the blue shells, I had a whole bit written on this, and then basically they've told you in the last Friday Facts. I mean, if you've ignored the Final Planet Friday Facts that's just come out, then you obviously won't know, and I'm not going to tell you, basically. But I had a whole bit about, kind of teasing it and what it might be and all that sort of stuff, and giving you clues without telling you. But it's all a bit redundant because they've just said, essentially. I suppose the other bit I can, definitely confirm is that there's not a proper cannon turret. So it was one of the things I speculated about in my, Friday Facts video, my combat video, was whether there'd be a cannon turret, basically, because you have all these cannon shells. They have buffed the cannon shells, obviously, so, there is a, more utility to them, and they are a little bit better. I still don't really like them, to be honest with you, but I think they are better. It's just that they're not, they're not used in a turret still. They're still a tank-only item. You do get more utility out of the tank, as I say, based on the fact that you can remotely control it. It's worth having multiple tanks, around your base in order to defend, your northern wall, your southern wall, etc., etc. That's a whole thing you can do in the game now. But, there is no proper cannon turret. It is used in the other turret that they talked about. Professor Bits asks, which turret is intended for each asteroid size? I assume gun is for small, cannon and rocket turret is for medium, and rocket is for large. I can't really talk about this now because it massively overlaps with things I've said I won't spoil, basically. But what I can say is it's not so much that turrets are matched to asteroids. That's not really what it does. It's more about resistances. So obviously the weapons deliver particular types of damage. Your laser does laser damage, your discharge defense does electric damage, your bullets do physical damage. So there are different damage types, and weapons deliver those types of damage. See my combat video for kind of giving a very potty guide to it. But basically the asteroids have certain resistances, and those resistances change based on the size of the asteroid and type of asteroid and that sort of thing. So they're a bit like biters, basically, that they have different resistances, and it's that changes. So a medium asteroid has different resistances to a huge asteroid, basically, and therefore some weapons are better to use than others, essentially. But I can't really talk about the detail now. I can't even do it in the live stream, really, if I'm going to avoid spoilers. But what I will do is pick it up on the 21st and do something for then. John Lewis asks, I mainly play with biters off. Is this still possible? Absolutely. Although they have actually added it back in. For a big part of the period where I was a beta tester, you had to have them on. We get into slightly spoilery territory with the rest of the answer for this. Just in case you've not seen the relevant Friday Facts, Pentapod eggs have to be harvested in order to make the biolabs. And of course, if enemies could be turned off, then you wouldn't be able to make that entity, and therefore you wouldn't be able to basically progress on Gleba. You're also required to capture biters in order to basically harvest the biter eggs out of the nests. So again, if biters could be turned off, that wouldn't be possible. So instead what they've done is they've given you a no enemies option. And what this actually does, as it says here, is it creates the nests, rafts and the biter spawners, but they don't actually spawn biters, and they don't actually spawn pentapods. So basically you have a no enemies mode which means no mobile enemies, so the nests will still be there. Angel Dude also asks about the related peaceful mode. As someone who usually plays on peaceful and generally doesn't interact with biters unless absolutely necessary, I was thinking of turning off peaceful for Space Age in favour of heavily neutered biters, namely lowered effect from pollution and removing time-based evolution, so as to make a large chunk of the tech tree not a complete waste of science. With that in mind, hearing that Nauvis combat became more challenging was very concerning to me, and it is making me reconsider my previous idea. How bad did the combat actually become, and how would you suggest approaching it for a player who generally avoids the combat and defense mechanics of the game? So yes, you can absolutely play with various adjusted settings. There is a peaceful mode, and you can turn things like evolution and expansion off, and also adjust the settings to them. Those are all in the game as it is now. A bit like the last one, there was a period where they weren't. So they were thinking of essentially either removing peaceful mode or changing it in some way, but yes, that is now back in the game. You can play in peaceful mode and you can adjust the settings. And the next little bit, I guess, could be spoilery, so just a little bit of a warning. It's not really, but just in case you don't want to see any of the settings in game. So here you go, just to show you, there is peaceful mode. It does pretty much what you'd expect. They're there, but they will only attack when you attack them. And again, enemy expansion and evolution are still there, and still factors, etc, etc. You can even adjust the starting area. PT asks what I think about the combat. Has the combat on Nauvis been changed significantly since 1.1, other than just changing enemy stats, which has already been talked about? I'm really asking if there's new combat mechanics or enemy types, flying enemies, special damage types or resistances, status effects, etc. My biggest issue with combat in vanilla Factorio has always been that the combat is boring. Not necessarily it's difficult, especially since various tactics like circle strafing nests with a tank have always been rather effective, while also being somewhat boring. Making biters harder without fundamentally changing their gameplay doesn't seem to fix the problem, at least in my opinion. I certainly think there's enough changes and enough there to make it interesting, and I certainly liked it for longer and more generally. The biters in particular on Nauvis, as I've been saying in this Let's Play, and you'll be able to see me sort of doing it in action, it's much more of a strategic choice as to what you do, and it really does push you towards more of a combined arms approach, where you are really keen to deploy multiple weapon systems on them, so poison and capsules and tank shells and all those sorts of things, because as they evolve, as they get tougher, the biter bases, you can't just turn up, wipe them out and go. And so it creates a strategic choice at the beginning. Do you avoid killing them off? And when they are evolved, how do you tackle that? Say, it is much more interesting to me. And as you've seen in the Friday Facts, there are obviously more enemies, and they do require different strategies to fight. So they're not just biters transposed to other planets. They are different enemies with different requirements on how you avoid engaging them in combat, how you actually engage them in combat, etc, etc. So yes, I think there is enough variety in there to make it interesting. Your mileage may vary. Big E also asks about the biters. How is it to deal with biters at each stage of the game, early, mid and late? And John Lewis also asks about the biters, clearly a popular topic. What do you think of the new biter and weapons rebalance? It's not much harder, as you've got a lot more tools. There's stuff you've seen in the Friday Facts, like the new turrets and the weapons, but there's also a few little sort of treats and extras and little bits that I'll mostly just leave or cover in the spoiler video on the 21st. There's also quality to bear in mind. Quality massively improves quite a lot of things, so even if you get just the early levels of quality, then it's really worth it, and it will really make fighting biters easier. But as I said in the answer to the previous question, there is a lot more strategic choice. So if you are worried about combat, what have you, then tweak the sliders down. I wouldn't say turn it off for your first go, because there is a lot there. There is a lot of fun stuff, and so you should experience it. If you don't like it, then obviously subsequent playthroughs then turn them off. But as I say, I would keep them on to start with. If you're worried about it, turn them down a bit and go from there. Okay, to get a bit more spoilery, there is also a new level of power armor. Okay, I'm not going to go any further than that in this video. It is in the intermediate planets, so it's, you know, it is in sort of fair game, but I don't know, it feels a lot more late game than it actually is. So yeah, there is a new power armor. You have kind of seen it, or hints of it. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. And Hellboy asks, a question you can answer ahead of time. Are you going to go in as blind as possible for the final planet, for your initial playthrough, or has that been spoiled for you? B. Brenny asks, have you played through the whole game yet, or at least gotten to Aquilo? Daniel Montiero also asks about my Let's Play. How will you structure your playthrough the week before release? No, I have not completed the game. As I've mentioned on quite a few of my live streams, what I've focused on in particular is building up this, which is a save file we're going to use in order to go to the intermediate planets, basically the first 3 planets, Gleba, Vulcanus and Fulgora, in whatever order my viewers pick, basically, and there's a poll on my YouTube channel to pick that. So I've not done that. I've also done very little on the final planet, so I'm not going to say what that is, because I'm saying I'm not going to do spoilers and stuff, but the final planet I've not really done that, and the whole endgame thing, I've not even touched that part. Now that may surprise you, given I've had it for weeks. As I've mentioned in a few of my streams, they did make some pretty big changes to Gleba that essentially meant it was more appropriate to restart than just to continue. I could have continued, we could have played that file. We'd have had things like discontinuities in the map gen. I'm not entirely sure we won't anyway. But basically, it was more appropriate to restart, and that effectively set me back because I had done the whole recording, we had a file, I was ready to go, pretty much, and it was down to the edit, and then they put in these changes, and so I had to restart. That's part of why these videos are basically going to be late. It sounds like I'm blaming them a bit there. That really isn't. No, it was my choice to do that. It wasn't a sensible choice, and I should have sort of backed out of it in some way, but it is what it is, basically. What I would say, though, is I have basically looked at everything, so you can enable cheat mode in the beta, and I have done that, and gone to all the planets, and messed about with the buildings, tried to see how they work, basically. But in terms of like building good builds, or looking at optimizing numbers, or even ratios and things like that, I've not done anything on that. So we will go in basically as a learning experience from when I start streaming it from the 21st. John Lewis asks, which planet would you choose to go to first? I would go to Fulgora. So the reason for that, to get a little bit spoilery if you worry about that sort of thing, but the reason for it is there's no real threat. The only threat is the lightning, and that can be tricky, but, it's not that much of a threat, really. It gives you a couple of awesome buildings, the Recycler and the EMP. The scrap mechanic, I find to be really fun. I really enjoyed playing with that. And the whole boosts to circuit production that the EMP gives are way more, useful and interesting, and etc., etc. That whole making billions of circuits thing is just made so much easier. The Tesla weapon and turret are really fun and really cool looking. So what's not to love? Daniel Montiero asks, from your experience, how long does it take to finish a planet, i.e. research all the local techs? I'd say something like 10 to 15 hours if you know what you're doing and what you want to achieve. Though it's actually really quite a range, because it depends quite a bit on which planets you've been to first, and whether you want to do a single planet in a single session, essentially. Because there is the option of going to a planet, doing a few of the key techs, and then leaving, essentially. And the other option is to, stay there until you've basically done everything you can do. Now, to some extent, that's not fully possible on all the planets, but certainly there is the option of doing a lot on a planet, or doing a little bit and kind of coming back. Because the thing is, these intermediate planets all sort of play together really well. You get some nice little things on one planet that really help you on another, and then some other things on that planet that help you on the third, and it all kind of really nicely sticks together. Also, it's your opportunity to really get your logistics flowing across the planets, and there are obviously various strategies for doing that. So, it really is up to you how you play. So, how do you measure something where it kind of depends what planets you've been to first? Okay, so let's get a little bit more spoilery with it. If you don't want to know too much detail about Vulcanus, then you know, you should skip ahead basically. But I'm going to show you the full Vulcanus tech tree, with the exception of a few sort of infinite technologies. The reason being it sort of fits nicely on the screen basically, and I can just show it to you in one shot. I will be covering up some things that would be a bit more spoilery for other planets. So if you're not fussed about seeing all of the Vulcanus technologies, then stick with it. If not, then skip ahead. Okay, so it obviously starts off with Vulcanus itself, which I guess technically is not an on-planet research, but is the research you have to do. And you see how it costs 1,000 science pack. So this is one of the things with these planets. They've not actually put in very large numbers of technologies, but they have put in very high costs for technologies. And you can think why a particular building might be useful for that. What you see in the middle here are all basically trigger tech. So tungsten carbide, calcite processing, foundries, the big mining drill, tungsten steel, and the actual metallurgic science pack itself are all done by trigger techs. You have to do things in order to unlock them. So that's almost half the tech tree. Okay, is done by doing stuff. You then see artillery and cliff explosives have moved to Vulcanus, as well as coal liquefaction. Okay, and note the costs on these. They are expensive. They also, all of these require space science. Yeah, so while there's the option of making reds, greens and blues on various places, with white science it's a little more complicated because obviously that does need to be made in space. You've then got asteroid reprocessing, which is one of your like buffable technologies basically. You've got a low density structure buff. You've then got the rail support foundations. Note how that works really with Fulgora. So you're getting that linkage between the two planets. Yeah. So in other words, in order to build the rails on Fulgora, you have to go to Vulcanus. And this is what I was saying about the planets work really well together, because you could go there first, even if Fulgora was your intended destination, unlock that, and then leave, basically, and not bother with a lot of these other ones. You've then got the level 3 speed modules. So basically the level 3 modules have been spread across the planets. And you then have your green belt, your tungsten transport belt, as it's currently called. That is typical. You've got machines that buff and, you know, do super duper well are actually unlocked via trigger techs. So as I say, you could, if you were literally just after the foundry and the big mining drill and you wanted to just those, you could get them, bring the stuff with you to build a rocket silo and a rocket, leave, basically. So once you've got those, you've got them. The problem is, of course, in order to build them, you require tungsten, tungsten carbide. So you're going to have to build up some infrastructure in order to basically build those buildings. So that's basically how all of the planets works. But in terms of number of technologies, as you can see, Vulcanus only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which you unlock via trigger technologies, and then 7, 8, 9, let's call it 10, 11, 12, 13, okay? And I guess 14 for that infinite tech. So there are 14 technologies that are part of the Vulcanus key tech tree, core tech tree rather. That doesn't mean to say the metallurgic science pack becomes useless after this. What it means is that these are the core technologies for Vulcanus. Okay, so as you can see, it's not as many as you might think, but the costs on them are very high. You need to put in a lot of effort to get them. And then, of course, every green belt that you want to use somewhere else, you've got to stick on a rocket and move away. That's the sort of dynamics of all of the planets. And they all work pretty much similar, apart from Gleba has this whole interaction between Nauvis and itself. Your Fulgora questions. So if you've skipped ahead, I am going to do this entire video from Fulgora, but it's Fulgora where there's nothing discovered. So if we need to, I'll spawn something in, but basically it's just showing you the terrain, so it's pretty safe for spoilers. A very serious user asks, what are the white rectangles on the small scrap islands on Fulgora? So here we are, we're coming up to one of the white squares on the map. I will show you that. As you can see, that is one of the white squares. It's obviously got scrap on it as well, but that is one of the white squares. And this is what it is, a Fulgoran vault ruin. So the reason they're marked is that they are a very rich source of the basic resources. And as noted on other answers to other questions, you have to do things on planets in order to unlock quite a few of the technologies. And so that means you're basically having to mine things, etc. So if you need to mine, say, 500 scrap or something, then mining 2 of these is really, really good, basically, because you just get them straight away. You also get a lot of the other resources, so you can see it's a lot of steel, a lot of iron gear wheels, and a lot of cables, okay? Whereas something like a normal ruin, you do get quite a few, but you can see that's a lot less, so you'd have to mine, what, sort of 4 or 5 of these in order to get the same amount, basically. And here we go, here's another one. You see it's got exactly the same resources in it, okay? Lego Technic Builder asks, is it a good idea to harvest ice asteroids in space and drop them down on Fulgora? So I think that's probably doable, but you actually get a lot of ice from the recycling, from the scrap, and with the change to make water like more productive in terms of steam usage, it's actually a kind of a resource that you kind of want to get rid of to some extent. When I was playing at the LAN Party, I was actually having to use, turning ice into water and turning it to steam in boilers because I had to get rid of it. I had far too much and it was clogging up my system. So yeah, I don't think that necessarily you're going to struggle to get water on Fulgora. It feels like you would because you've not got pumps and all that sort of stuff, but in reality, as I say, you get a lot of water from the ice, from the scrap, basically. So to get a little bit more, it's not really spoilery, but to talk about other parts of the game in relation to this, that, if you're just happy to have Fulgora spoilers, I guess, but, you want to keep up clear of other spoilers. I don't know why you would, but and I'm not talking Endgame and Aquilo, but if you're wanting to avoid anything else, then obviously this question overlaps with those. So one of the problems with the platforms at the moment is, or it was, maybe they've added it in the meantime, but you can't actually communicate with platforms via circuit network. So if you wanted to tell it something like, I need more ice and stuff like that, the way you have to do it is with the logistics network, that logistics group system, and it's not quite as got the fine control. You can't do things like, as you would be with trains and controlling bots in the bot network and things like that. It's not quite as fine controlled with that. So if you wanted some complex check, because obviously the ice is what you're trying to deliver, but you want water and maybe you want steam, and so your checks might be around water and steam, and you would have to convert that into something and then somehow get that into the logistics groupings. You see what I mean? It's not a direct link between the thing you're actually concerned about and the thing that you're trying to get your platform to deliver to you, if you see what I mean. So it's not quite a joined up thing in the way you're maybe thinking about. The other thing, the real concern on Fulgora is space and power, basically. So you get loads of actual electricity from the lightning, but you have to store it during the day, essentially. So you only get that at night, and then you have to stick it in loads and loads of accumulators in order to be able to use it during the day. And so you end up covering the plateaus with accumulators. And of course, you can't connect up all of the plateaus necessarily. So for example, on the map here, these plateaus just wouldn't be connectable. You might be able to get something across there, maybe. You could certainly probably cross that. But the number of plateaus you can actually link together is very limited. And you can only build the rail, the elevated... you have to use elevated rail, which is expensive. But you can only travel elevated rail around this lighter coloured stuff until you get the super foundations, which are on Vulcanus, you see. So, you can connect materially. You can send, scrap or steel or whatever you want to between them using... rail pieces that you can connect, but of course you're limited by curves and stuff like that, so it's not always easy to build. But also you've got to fit a train on, you've got to fit a station on, you've got to fit unloading on, and then you've also got to put on a load of accumulators in order to power it all, because you won't necessarily be able to connect it. So we could cover this island in accumulators and this one, and they're useless anywhere else because there's no way of transferring the power across. Quality, of course, does extend the range of power poles. So even something like quality power poles do have a bit of a use, where initially I was thinking, well, those are completely useless, why would you bother? Well, if you want to bridge a gap across here, a quality power pole might just do it, or two, I guess, might just do it for you. Okay, so there are all sorts of ways around solving these problems until you get, the ultimate solution. But yeah, your problems are space and power. The other thing to note with space platforms, as I say, getting into that territory, is that everywhere else except Nauvis, they will encounter proper asteroids. Okay, so when they are orbiting around Fulgora, there are proper asteroids in Fulgoran orbit. And that means you have to destroy them, which means you have to be generating ammo, and you need to be managing your platforms properly. So just having one that's sat in orbit could be a little tricky, because you've got to make all that ammo as well as doing the ice thing, basically. So it would be quite a big platform, and that's a lot of platform pieces to either make on Fulgora or ship across from Nauvis. So I certainly think it's doable. I don't know if it's the most optimal solution. Daniel Montiero asks a couple of questions about recyclers. Regarding recyclers, does it recycle one item at a time? And are recyclers affected by beacons? Big E asks, how much does quality and recycling change your base designs and gameplay? Yes, so a recycler recycles one item at a time in the general sense of that word. So you can have multiple of that item in, but it only recycles one of that item. As you can see flashing through here, it does output multiple things though, so you can get multiple different things, and it has these slots because you could get quite a lot of ingredients, and if it's picked up one item of one thing, one item of another, and it recycles those in turn, and it's actually got a blocked output, then it just allows you to buffer things internally. You will also notice it has 4 module slots, and that's because the real intention of this building is, it's really driven towards quality, and of course having lots of quality modules in here is, what you want basically. You will also see the rate of the recycling is extremely fast. It is a super quick machine. So to answer the other question, yes, they are affected by beacons. So this recycler is getting a 60% crafting speed bonus from having this beacon with 2 level 1 speed modules in it. And to kind of prove it is that I'll swap them to efficiency, and we see now that it's just got its regular 0.5 crafting speed. Okay, so yeah, they are affected by beacons, but beacons aren't really particularly useful with them because the recipe is so quick. I don't know if you can see here, it has a processing speed of 2.5 per second, so it can chew through 2.5 items per second and recycle them. They are very quick. You do not need many of them to clear out a belt, basically. So just to prove that, this recycler is pumping through the pieces of rail that are being put in quicker than they can be put in by this regular inserter, and it has the maximum amount of bonus. So it's just cleared through 100 pieces of rail and turned them into component pieces in the time it's taken me to say this sentence, basically. So recyclers are very, very quick, so putting speed modules on them is not particularly useful. John Luz asks the big question to round us out: are there any enemies on Fulgora? If so, what are they? No, there are no enemies on Fulgora. Okay, the threat is the lightning combined with the oil sand, which is very, very slow to walk in. So the idea is that that's the threat, and what keeps you mostly contained to the plateaus is that if you walk too far on this oil sand, night will fall and you will get hit by lightning. Now, you can survive a few hits from lightning if you've got personal shields on, but if you are hit too many times, it will kill you. They are quite powerful in that way. To give you some context on that, I've obviously got level 2 power armor on here. If I walk on the plateau, it's sort of normal walking speed. If I walk on this like lighter oil sand, it slows down. If I walk on the dark oil sand, it's really slow. And you notice it pops this symbol up every time you're in danger, essentially. This doesn't mean I'm going to get hit by lightning. It just means that I'm at risk of getting hit by lightning. Okay, because it's not night, so I'm at risk, and as soon as I go on the plateau, I come in range of this, and suddenly we're okay. But yeah, that's the threat. The threat is the lightning. There are no enemies on Fulgora. Something nobody asked any questions about were these things. Okay, these things are Fulgorite, as we were guessing, but they don't contain glass. There is no glass in the game. What they do have is the holmium. Okay, and they're a very valuable source of the holmium. Okay, so if you see these, do mine them, because you will get, although it looks like a little bit, it's really difficult to get hold of holmium. And obviously this is the raw stuff and you have to process it, but yes, these are really worth picking up when you find them, okay? Your Vulcanus questions. So just a note, if you are coming here just to look at the Vulcanus stuff and you're avoiding the other planets and you want absolutely no spoilers at all about the intermediate planets, I don't know why you're watching the video, but in case you do, or you're just being selective, I am going to do each of the planet sections on the planets. So if you don't even want to see them, then, you need to go somewhere else. So basically, this is Vulcanus. This is what it looks like. It is a kind of blasted black wasteland, basically, a burnt hellscape. And Daniel Montiero is into orienteering. How hard is it to navigate Vulcanus with all the cliffs? For my money, the cliffs on Vulcanus are an absolute pain. They get right in the way of everything, and this is why cliff explosive is on this planet, and it's because cliffs really are very annoying. The lava is also pretty difficult to work with. It's not quite as restrictive, I guess, as Fulgora in terms of, like where to build and all that sort of stuff, but it is quite annoying. So really, elevated rail, I would say, is like a necessity across all of the planets. Possibly less so on Gleba, maybe, but even there, it's really, really useful. So, although it's technically, described as optional and you can turn it off, that's more so that you can play with it in normal games. For Space Age, it's kind of vital, because cliffs are just really annoying on Nauvis, in my opinion. There are a few questions around Demolishers. Rue of Landarin asked, and I think the cloud is the countermeasure to Spidertron's. Spidertron's rocket fire speed would wreck the worms, so a cloud that stuns or clogs the weapon slots of a Spidertron would be a decent countermeasure to them. And since you don't get the Spidertron until a different planet, that makes the sentence in the Friday Facts make more sense. OST Kaka asks, I'm curious, this trail of lava, it lasts forever? You gotta landfill it? So, what you'll notice here, and what I hadn't appreciated when they described it, is that the Demolishers will just crush things in their way. They don't really have like a pathfinding around the thing. So I've not aggroed this. This is not doing this because it's attacking me. You'll see that as it just comes to this cliff here, it will demolish it. And if you kite it around, it will demolish the cliffs as it tries to attack you, basically. So that can be quite fun. And I say, I'm not affecting this guy at all. He's just here. And as you can see, it's starting to cause the sparking and stuff like that. And I just got run over. Oh dear. That was my fault, though. I literally ran into its face because I wasn't looking properly. The lava trail. So the lava trail is like something that you will experience a sort of slowdown effect in. You see the sparking of the armor there. This here, it's more like a sort of a, an effect on the player. There is a reason that it's there and that it does a thing. In terms of Spidertron, it does have a huge slowing effect on Spidertron. Okay, so the lava trail doesn't really damage you, but it does slow certainly Spidertron. I think it might slow you, but it's sort of it's interesting. It's a kind of building effect essentially. It like increases and decreases. Okay, so you do want to avoid it. And the thing that it puts out is the idea is it's gumming up your all of your electronics. So it does have that effect on everything really. Yes, the idea is that this cloud that it puts out slows other things. There is also something else in the game, and I say I'm sort of avoiding saying it, but there is another thing in it that is also affected by the Spidertron. Cold Docent asks, are there no new weapons or turrets on Vulcanus? No, there are no new weapons and no new turret on Vulcanus. Instead, artillery and the cliff explosives have been moved to Vulcanus. Artillery, you can probably guess why, because the worms are quite slow moving, and having a weapon system where you can spam in rounds is actually sort of useful against that sort of an enemy. But basically, no, there are no new weapons or any kind of thing like that on Vulcanus. It's really about the foundry and the big mining drill. I'll be honest, Vulcanus is actually fairly mundane. I know the things you get out of it are awesome, and that's what everyone's so excited about. But you know, all you get's the artillery and the cliff explosive, and you know, it's not all that. There's not a lot to Vulcanus actually. It is good what you get, and what it has is used in quite a few ingredients off planet. But you know, it's not actually. I don't know. I think there's a bit of a primacy bias. I don't know if that's a proper thing, but like because it's the planet that everyone had saw first and had this amazing machines on it, etc., then it's great. But the mechanic is just pumping fluids around. You know, it doesn't really have its own little mechanic or anything. It's kind of that gives you some great buildings. Okay, fine. You know that's good, but you know Gleba's now more interesting in my opinion than Vulcanus. You know, but that is very much a personal thing. I still fully understand why people love it, and you know the lava in particular looks amazing, and as do these these sulfur fumarole things. So yeah, I don't dislike the planet. For me, it's not actually all that sort of mechanically interesting. Your Gleba questions. So just to note, if you are skipping round or you're just only interested in the Gleba stuff and you're not looked at the other planets, I am doing each section that relates to a planet from the planet. So if you don't want to see anything, you know, you don't want any spoilers whatsoever for a particular planet, then, you know, do skip that section. But this is Gleba. You didn't really have any questions about Gleba particularly, but this is Gleba. Elman's Trismegistus demonstrates not having watched the More Thoughts video by asking, so what was the problem on Gleba, now that you can actually talk about it? And Nora Transpire also asks, what are the potential Gleba changes you've heard of so far? So I kind of covered this one in the some of the other videos I've done about what the problems were with Gleba and how they fixed them. But the point was that Gleba was a bit too focused on things you'd want in the end game. So it had the Spidertron, and of course the Spidertron loses a lot of utility with the whole changes to the tank, basically. So that kind of takes its role to a degree. And obviously it had the missile turret as well. Well, the missile turret is great fun, but the missile turret is really about platforms that are having to deal with bigger asteroids. Also, Spidertron, I should note, only stacks to 1 in a rocket, so it's a lot of rockets to send to have like an army of Spidertrons. You then got the stack inserter. Now, the thing with the stack inserter, it does do massive throughput, it's really cool, etc., but you kind of have to completely redesign all of your base to work with stacked belts. You know, it's not quite the same linear upgrade that a faster belt is, which is what you get on Vulcanus. So it's not really equivalent, if you see what I mean. You know, because you've got that, it's still got swing time and all that sort of stuff on the arm. You know, it's not the same as a upgraded belt. Okay. You've then got the biochamber, which, as it was, didn't really have a lot of use off of Gleba. You know, it was really a building focused on Gleba. And also the agricultural tower, exactly the same thing. It's really focused on Gleba. So why you're not? It's not the same as going to Vulcanus and getting the foundry and the big mining drill. They're buildings only that are really useful on Gleba, so it's self-contained. The whole biter capture thing was interesting, but I never really got to the point where I was like using that. But it seemed very complicated was sort of the problem with it. That the things it was giving you, these biter eggs out of, you know, captured nests, well, you'd have to do it on Nauvis, and it involves putting into place quite a complicated logistic chain, and it feels like, okay, well, what I need to get my base up and running and doing lots of stuff and very productive, and then I'll deal with it. You know, it didn't feel like this is something I must have to make my life easier. And of course, then you've got to... So in other words, the rewards you're getting are sort of, okay, great, but I'll do them later. And what are you having to do in order to get those rewards? Well, you're having to mess around with a mechanic that at that time basically made all of your stuff useless. So every building you built and every process that you're running could collapse, and then all of your stuff just gets rotten. And it's just useless then, basically. And that's quite a punishment for making a mistake or turning a belt round by accident or some mistake like that. And you've got to go through all that stress and pain and annoyance in order to get things that actually you don't really want until later. So the changes that I made are one of the big ones for me personally were these guys. Now, gone are patches on Gleba. Instead, we get these stromatolites, and as you can see, they produce copper ore and bacteria and stuff like that. And there's a whole chain to do with them. And the cool thing about it is, if you just leave them, they turn into ore basically. So they spoil, turn into ore, and they give you something useful. So it literally takes the spoilage mechanic and says, no, actually that's useful. And it's actually quite fun to play with these and get a whole chain up and running that gives you material natively. Because of course you can import it, but having it there, you know, using a process that's native to the planet is interesting. The other thing is obviously this biolab. Now the biolab, as it says, cannot be placed anywhere other than Nauvis. Okay, so I can't show you it and answer this video here, but this guy is pretty, you know, it's a pretty good reward, I would say, for doing stuff on Gleba. The thing I would say with it is a bit more complicated than the other chain still. It does require like more of the steps to get further down the tech tree in order to get this. So it is a bit more work than the other things. Okay, so we'll have to play with it. You know, I have not touched it. I've not done anything with it because it just wasn't in the game when I was, you know, doing any of my messing about on Gleba. So the real answer of is this a useful thing, is it a good thing, I can't answer that question, you see, because, you know, it sounds like it's really powerful and sounds like it's really useful. Getting there feels like it's going to be quite complicated. Maybe I'm wrong. You know, maybe it is easier to get. This is the other thing that comes out of Gleba, but is not actually used on Gleba. So what they did in an intermediate step is they had it able to, like it was able to produce basically science packs with a 50% prod bonus. So they were going down the whole route of, oh, by the way, these have spoiled into copper now, you see, the bacteria that was there. But yes, so they have gone down the route. They were sort of following the same route effectively. And I don't know, it was just a bit naff, because I did mess about with it as saying cheat mode, but it was just a bit sort of, oh, okay, so that, it's not all that. The thing with it, it wasn't really using the mechanic in an interesting way. You just fed the resources into it and it gave you science packs. You know, so it wasn't like liquid metal has to go into a foundry and, you know, the EMP... Well, the EMP doesn't really have anything special about it, I suppose. But the EMP needs to be made using this holmium stuff, which is pretty difficult to get and requires recycling and all that sort of stuff. So, and you get a recycler, which is a very different mechanic, you know. So, it was still a bit sort of, you know, it's good, but it doesn't feel interesting enough. And I think the biolab is interesting enough, but we'll have to see. The Hellman's Trismegistus asks, Pentapods are quite spider-like. What about arachnophobes? So there is an arachnophobia mode. Okay, so if you go into settings, and then you go into graphics, you'll see enable arachnophobia mode. It does give a warning, because what it does is it means you can't see the legs. Okay, so if we go and find a pentapod or two, they will look very weird, but also it's very difficult to fight the stompers if you don't know where the legs are. So what we've got to try and do is get it to spawn some of the proper bad lads. I need to switch around. There you go. So we've now got a stomper that doesn't have legs on it. Okay, it's got its feet. As you can see, it's very silly. It's also quicker than me, basically, so it's going to catch me, and I'm going to have to get outside of its aggro range, basically, in order to get it. Oh, just to leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone. But as I say, it doesn't show the legs, okay? So it's a floating body. You're still not getting bored, crikey. He really is coming for me, isn't he? But basically, it doesn't show the legs. But as you can see, it can be a bit difficult to see what's going on because they blend in quite well. He really is coming for me. He's really keen to say hello. Might just have to kill him. I don't want to kill you, mate. I don't want to kill you. You should know I do have quite a lot of buffs on because, you know, of the cheat mode. But yes, so that's the arachnophobia mode, okay? It just shows you the legs. It takes out the legs rather than, you know, things. And it can be a little difficult to see what's going on. You can't really tell the direction and stuff very well without the legs. But yeah, that is arachnophobia mode in Factorio. Okay, and that's it for part 1. Unfortunately, I did not manage to get everything edited together, so we will have to pick up in a part 2 where I'll cover more of the general mechanics, talk about Nauvis and the space platforms, which I know I got a lot of questions on, but as I say, I just couldn't get it all edited together. So apologies for that, you'll have to pick up in a second video. OST Kirka also asks,